Welcome to the King's Court, a new YouTube channel. Today I'm decided to start off with the basic concepts of MMORGs, the City of Heroes as the fundamental line of this. Since there's a lot of differences from the Holy Trinity you see in a lot of other MMORGs, City of Heroes has a lot of differences. But first, let's take a quick thanks to our sponsor, TC Marketing. TC Marketing has over 20 years of advertising and promotional experience. If your needs are 10 items to 1 million items, they have the advertising and promotional expertise that you will need. Their easy to navigate website has over 850,000 products, both brand name and generic. TC Marketing will work personally with you to ensure that you keep your brand name and logo integrity. Call now or email your order and get up to 1 hour of free graphic support using promo code KINGS. Alright, I'm going to start off this series with super basic concepts. Each slide will ultimately get its own video down the road to go into more depth. One other thing is this will be more tailored to learn how to do speed and solo task forces or soloing AVs. So if you want to see more about what I'm talking about, you could take a look at the Speed Lady Grey Task Force I posted earlier. The link will be down below. Alright, really the first question you want to really ask is, what is an MMORG? It's an online role-playing game. You have a lot of people playing it, and they're basically participating simultaneously. Role-playing doesn't all mean you're pretending to be the person, like when you're talking. It just means that you're playing a character that's going through a whole different set of task forces and missions and stuff like that. So what I really want to do is just quickly touch over some basic terms and definitions that I'll probably use a lot. Aggro, which is basically how the spawns are aggressive towards each player, a character, or the objectives. Damage mitigation, buffs and debuffs. This is either improving a character's statistics or lowering a bad guy's statistics, or vice versa, depending upon if it's player versus player or not. DPS is damage per second. It's the amount of continuous damage that a character can produce. You get this if you're really actually calculating it. You would basically take a minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes of sustained attacking, and you would then divide it by like either 60, 120, or 180. But ultimately what really DPS means is it just means a damage or damage characters. Yeah, I'm going to be talking about crowd control. This is also a form of damage mitigation, but it's a little bit different because it's basically keeping characters or bad guys from attacking or from moving, depending upon which crowd control. We'll get into that a little bit more. And healing, which is kind of the most straightforward. It's by bringing character hit points back up. So your life goes down, healing brings the life back up. Alright, well first what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the Holy Trinity, which is technically the traditional roles in most MMORGs. You got your tank, you got your damage, and you got your healers. Damage can be changed either into range or melee. So what do these roles do? Looking at the tanking basically, you got a big guy, he's brutish, he goes in and he starts swinging, hitting, and getting all the attention of everybody around him. Healers sit back, heal the tank, and heal the range and the melee damage as needed. The range usually sit back, blast away, high damage, lower survivability. Melee damage, like in Warcraft, you can spec towards tanking or damage. They jump in there, they have a higher survivability rate than a lot of the range, but usually don't do as much damage, but there's always exceptions. The melee damage does their damage, and usually that's how it is a traditional role. You have the three. You need your tank, you need your damage, and then you need your healers. Alright, now let's take a look at that City of Heroes character roles. And what we're going to look at is they still have the damage and they still have the tanking. But what they added is they added a dedicated crowd control aspect, and instead of healing, they added support classes. Now, I'm going to go more in depth, but they focus more on stats and statistics that your character has and being able to accomplish things than if you're able to, healing the life back up. So those are some of the main changes. You got tanking, you got your damage, but now you have a dedicated crowd control, and you also have support healing instead of just healing. All right, let's start and dive right into that meat and potatoes of this, where we start talking about roles and what different characters or different positions on a team, what they actually do. Now, each one of these slides and everything from this point on is going to get a more in-depth video later on, where we'll start talking about tactics and all the different kind of things. But right now, let's just get into the base team role. As I said, super simple stuff right now. All right, so when I started playing, this is the first role that I did. I did a tank. I didn't know. I kind of wanted to make my character like Superman, flying, laser beams. Later on, my play style evolved. But kind of for me now, no matter what I play, I tank it. I tank my blasters. I tank my defenders. I tank my cores, everything like that. So what is a tank? Tank is basically that meat shield, that damage soaker. So, traditionally what we're looking at is it's that guy who goes in, or girl, and goes in and takes all the attention. They taunt bad guys towards them. They usually have a high defense, a high resist, a high regen, or a combination of all three. And then they control the spawn's aggression by focusing on themselves than the rest of the team. Now, with City of Heroes, there is a cap, and we'll talk more about that when we do the tanking video. Now, that's more traditionally it's done. And most teams that have a tank, the tank goes in and he does do that, but in City of Heroes, there's ways that a tank will still have a fair high amount of damage that it can also deal. So it kind of becomes a duo role where they're tanking. And now, unconditionally, and I'll be honest, a lot of my characters, I've done it with my defender, one of my kins. I've done it with my sonic defender. I've done it with my blaster too. But and a lot of times with pretty much any dom that I play. Now, not every team will always have access to a tank. So now, unconditional tanking, ultimately what tanking really does is you are taking the initial aggro, the initial hit that all the spawns, because when you first attack a group, the group will have its attention and it will focus on 1 to 2 people. If you have a traditional tank in, they'll focus on the tank, and the tank can usually take that hit pretty easily. Most non-tanks won't be able to. Now, you can do this also taking the role. You can use dominators, controllers, usually by starting off with a stun or a hold, something that basically keeps them from moving. The other way is you have a character that, due to high damage mitigation, like defensive and resist buffs, can jump in and get in before everybody else on there, so the initial attack will go onto that character. And if the character has high enough damage mitigation on them, like buffs, regen, resists, different things like that, they can usually survive even though they're not a tank. So some of the best teams I've been on have been like all core defender blaster TFs. Massive damage and massive damage mitigation. But we'll get into that part a little bit further down. Alright, so now we're going to get into the crowd control role. Now, the thing is this is kind of a long session because there's a lot about it, and it's a different type of thing for most MMORGs where they actually have somebody dedicated for crowd control. So now, when people think of crowd control, they just think of the straight up holds. But there's a lot of different kinds of crowd control. There's soft and hard crowd controls. Also, when you're looking at crowd control, you need to look at there's 4 real big factors when it comes to crowd control. You have the type of control you're using, the magnitude of your control, like how powerful your control is. Now, you can't just hold everything with just a single hold. Minions take a certain amount of magnitude of hold. Lieutenants take a magnitude of hold. Bosses take a certain magnitude. Different AVs have different magnitudes of control to be able to hold them, so you'll have to stack controls on them. And then there's duration of holds. And then you have what the target's resistance to the hold is. When we talk about each of these controls, we're going to be talking about each of those 4 factors. First, let's start off with hold. Hold is the most common and the most visible. A hold is exactly what it does. It keeps the bad guy from moving, and it also keeps them from attacking. Now, when we're looking at this, there's certain things like the green Mitos. We're going to talk to that when I start going into the Hamidon or the Lady Grey Task Force, where you have to stack holds to be able to do damage. You can look at your hold. Your hold, it basically keeps them from moving, and also keeps them from attacking. This is considered a hard control. The other hard control we're going to really look at is called is a disorient. Now, the disorient, it keeps them from attacking, but does not keep them from moving. So if you hit somebody with a disorient, they're going to start walking in random directions. A disorient usually has a longer duration than a hold, but sometimes has a longer recharge also. So you have to, when you're making your character, you can look at how much of a magnitude of the control that is for your disorient or your hold, and your duration of it. Are you able to stack that hold, or are you going to have to alternate your certain types of control? So that's your hard controls. Now, what you have is also they have soft control. Soft controls, the spawns are able to attack, or they're able to attack sometimes, or the hold can be or the control can be interrupted. So let's start off with an immobilization. Immobilization is just that. It keeps them in place. A good common tactic, you got to use a disorient, and then you hit an immobilization, and now you basically have the same thing as your hold. Disorients and immobilizations, they have a lower resist rate. Holds, a lot of time, have higher resist rates. Then you have fear and sleep. Now, fear is pretty much like a hold. They'll stay in one spot for a while. They'll maybe get one attack off. They'll go back into a hold. They'll go attack again, and it's called a soft control because they can still attack, but they're not attacking all at once, and they're not all attacking. Fear has a really low resist on most player-made stuff, and even actually in PvP it also has a low control. Then you also have sleep. Sleep has the least resistance in the game. Now, the thing about a sleep, though, is the moment they are hit by anything, either a buff, a debuff, take a 1 point of damage, anything, the control is broken. It has a low resist. It's one of those niche controls that really has uses at certain ports. And when we go into the crowd control video, we'll get into all that type of stuff. Ultimately, what you want to really take away from this slide is the 4 factors when you're looking at control: the type of control, the magnitude of the control, the duration, and the resist. Alright, so this next one we're going to go over, it's really quick and easy and straight to the point, is DPS or damage characters. Now these DPS and damage characters, it's exactly what they're meant to do. They defeat things quickly. You know, basically the concept is if a character is defeated, they can't fight back. Their goal is to give the highest amount of damage that they can. You know, either in burst or in a sustained part. Now we'll get into which is better, sustained or burst, during the damage melee video. So now what we're going to really look at is, you know, that range. They have usually have superior damage than a melee character, but have a less natural survivability. You know, less natural hit points, regeneration, resistance, and defenses due to the power selections that you can take, versus the melee, which will ultimately do a little bit less damage, but will have more of a more natural hit point regeneration, resists, and defenses. A little bit more survivability because they're melee tunes. They're in the fight. Again, what this really is their role is to ultimately do the most damage they can. Alright, for me, some of the most funnest characters to play are the support characters. I mean, the potential they have at the end game for that high level, then this is where City Heroes really differs from many of the other MMORGs. And they do not, and because of the mechanics of the game, they don't really limit certain enhancements to certain creatures or certain people. Your support characters, on like many teams and many roles, they're the ones who are going to kind of bring it all together in that aspect. You know, first, what we're going to do is, you know, there's basically two main concepts you have. You have your damage mitigation, and you have your healing. Now, I've always felt damage mitigation is always the most effective way to keep yourself moving in task forces and stuff, and healing is pretty much the least effective. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of I'll talk about the healing first, and healing is needed. I mean, I'm not saying that you don't use healing. Now, dedicated healing is a little redundant, because if you're losing hit points fast enough, there is no way you can heal to overcome that deficiency. So that right there is kind of why healing is the least effective in City of Heroes. Is you can only heal so fast with your powers coming back, your recharges, and how much each heal actually gives. So what we really want to look at is what the most effective part is going to be your damage mitigation. Your first little ways I'm going to look at is you're going to look at increasing resistance, damage resistance, increasing defense. Now, this right here is going to basically make if you increase your defense through like cold shields or whatever it takes, you're going to get hit less by the enemy. And if you increase your damage resistance, then at that point, the damage you take is going to be less. That is ultimately why tanks can do what tanks do, is because they have a higher natural resist and defense. But what these support characters can do is the support characters can raise that ability. Characters that normally couldn't take a hit will now be able to take hits. The next mitigation we're going to look at is regen and recovery. Now, what regeneration, that's how fast you get hit points per second. You know, if your regeneration is high, when you get hit, you recover much faster. It may sound common sense, but you need to really kind of look at it and say, oh, hey, my regeneration, if you regenerate 50 points of damage a second, and you get hit by 30 some points of damage, you're going to already have not lost any life, because your recovery, your regeneration is going to be faster than the damage that's coming in. Also, you have recovery, and you want to. A reason I put recovery under damage mitigation is if you don't have endurance, you can't either attack and you can't use defensive powers. So recovery is also, if you don't have recovery and you're losing your endurance and you can't cast anything or you can't use your toggles, you will ultimately then decrease your resistance, decrease your defense, decrease a lot of your abilities. So that's why recovery is under damage mitigation. Now we're also looking at another damage mitigation, and is recharge and damage. And the reason that this is under damage mitigation is because your attacks will come back faster, your attacks may do more, your powers come back faster, so you can use those powers more often. With the damage increase and your recharge, again, a defeated foe can't fight back. That's why increasing recharge and increasing damage is also under damage mitigation. And the final damage mitigation that we'll talk about is decreasing the enemy stats, debuffing them. So just as if increasing your resist and your defense, your regen, your recovery, your recharge, and your damage, if you increase yours while simultaneously decreasing your enemy stats, then your missions, your teams, and your task forces go much, much easier. So that's why damage mitigation is still the most effective form in City of Heroes. Just a quick recap: you have your support characters, and you have the two different types you can work with. You have damage mitigation and you have healing. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to kind of put this out there right now, and this is what I'm really just going to say is, in City of Heroes, the one main thing that's going to be your total game changer is Invention IOs and the Incarnate system. This right here will basically take characters and allow them to fill multiple roles and fill those characters' natural gaps. There'll be a whole video on just inventions and just incarnates later on. When you start to really put your characters together, you really want to start looking into your invention IOs and your incarnate abilities. Alright guys, that's it for the first video of Kingsbury's Court. Just to review, we kind of went over the basic concept and character roles, and just kind of went out there and said there was a incarnate and IO system that you might want to take a look into. So next video, just put in the comments what you like me to do first. I'll be working on the next specific videos. I'm going to start off with the tanking video, but if I get enough saying, hey, I want something a slight bit different, I can hit those first. Also, I'd like to know what speed task forces you want me to walk through. You know, Lady Grey, LRSF, Lord Recluse, Miss Liberty, Hess, Positron, just whatever task forces you want me to do walkthroughs on. I can definitely do that also, because those will be other videos. And also would like you to hit like and subscribe for more videos. All right, and you guys have a wonderful day.